Have you ever smelled your own skin burning? I have. It smells like roasting pork and burnt sugar. A sickeningly sweet odor that clings to your final breath. As the flames swallowed our basement, I screamed for my husband, Dylan, and our 12-year-old son, Kai. I tore my fingernails off trying to claw open the door they had locked from the outside. Through the small, smoke-stained window, I saw them standing on the lawn. They weren't panicking. Dylan was holding the hand of his secretary, Rachel. Kai was hugging her waist. They were watching me die. Then, I woke up. The heat was the first thing to vanish. 1 second, my lungs were expanding with searing, toxic black smoke. My vocal cords shredding as I screamed for Dylan and Kai. The next second, my eyes snapped open to the cool, sterile darkness of my own bedroom. I vaulted out of bed, gasping, my hands frantically slapping at my arms, my face, my chest. Where are the burns? Where is the blistering skin? I collapsed onto the hardwood floor, my chest heaving, gulping in the crisp, air-conditioned oxygen. The familiar hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the rhythmic ticking of the hallway clock were the only sounds in the house. There was no roaring inferno. There was no suffocating scent of propane. Trembling, I crawled toward the nightstand and ripped my phone from its charger. The harsh blue light blinded me for a moment. October 14th, 6:00 a.m. I dropped the phone. It was exactly 24 hours before the fire. 24 hours before my husband of 14 years and the son I had birthed would lock me in our basement with a loosened gas valve and a faulty water heater. I pressed my back against the wall, pulling my knees to my chest as the memories crashed over me like a suffocating wave. Yesterday, or rather, the tomorrow of my previous life, Dylan had casually asked me to go downstairs to switch the laundry. I had smelled the rotten egg stench of propane the moment I hit the bottom step. I remember calling out to him. I remember the heavy oak door slamming shut at the top of the stairs. The click of the deadbolt. I remembered the frantic panic. The realization that the old water heater's pilot light was clicking, trying to ignite. I had screamed for them to run. To get out of the house. Even as the explosion threw me across the concrete floor, shattering my ribs and igniting my clothes, my only thought had been of them. I dragged my broken body up the stairs, beating bloody fists against the wood, desperate to know if my family was safe. And then, I had looked through the narrow glass pane at the top of the door. I saw the front lawn illuminated by the street lamps. I saw Dylan. He wasn't rushing to unlock the door. He wasn't calling 911. He was standing there with Rachel, the 26-year-old paralegal from his law firm. He had his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. And standing right beside them, clutching Rachel's hand, was my son, Kai. Kai wasn't crying. He was looking at the house with a blank, cold expression. As the flames licked up the basement walls and began to melt the soles of my shoes, I watched Dylan lean down and kiss Rachel's forehead. They had planned it. All of it. A soft groan came from the bed. Dylan shifted under the duvet, pulling the blankets higher. The man I had worked 2 waitress jobs to put through law school. The man I had scrubbed floors for. The man who had held my hand in the delivery room. A visceral, acidic wave of nausea hit me. I clamped a hand over my mouth and bolted to the master bathroom, locking the door silently behind me before emptying my stomach into the toilet. I sat on the cold tile, wiping my mouth with the back of a trembling hand, staring at my reflection in the vanity mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and bloodshot, but I was whole. I was alive. God or fate, or the universe had ripped me out of the flames and thrown me back in time. They had given me a second chance. I slowly stood up and washed my face. The icy water grounded me. The panic was receding, leaving behind a cold, hardened void in my chest. The woman who loved Dylan Henderson died in that basement. The mother who would sacrifice everything for Kai Henderson burned to ashes. I dried my face with a towel. I wasn't going to warn them. I wasn't going to confront them. I was going to let them play their hand, and I was going to walk away while their perfect little murderous plan went up in smoke. By By 7:00 a.m., the house was awake, playing out a script I already knew by heart. I was in the kitchen, cracking eggs into a skillet, moving like a ghost, haunting my own life. Dylan walked in, adjusting the knot of his silk tie, a tie I had bought him for his birthday. He looked exactly as he had the morning of my murder. Handsome, meticulously groomed, and wearing a mask of casual indifference. "Morning, Chloe," he said, barely glancing at me as he poured a cup of coffee. "Make sure my gray suit is back from the dry cleaners today. Will you? I have a big deposition tomorrow." Tomorrow. The day he planned to be a grieving widower. "Of course," I replied. My voice was eerily calm, devoid of the tremor I felt in my core. I set a plate of scrambled eggs and bacon on the island. Heavy, stomping footsteps echoed down the stairs. Kai dragged himself into the kitchen, his eyes glued to his phone screen. At 12, he was a miniature version of his father. He possessed the same sandy hair, the same sharp jawline, and, as I now realized, the same absolute lack of empathy. "Eat your eggs while they're hot, Kai," I said, sliding a plate toward him. He scowled, pushing the plate away with the back of his hand. "I don't want eggs. Rachel makes those protein pancakes when she comes over to help Dad with paperwork. Why can't you make those?" In my past life, that comment had stung, but I had brushed it off as preteen angst. I had convinced myself Rachel was just a helpful coworker. Now, the implication hit me like a physical blow. Rachel had been playing house in my kitchen while I was running errands. Dylan cleared his throat, shooting Kai a warning glare. "Eat what your mother made, Kai." "Whatever," Kai muttered, picking up his fork and jabbing it into an egg. "Can I go to Kyle's house after school tomorrow?" "We'll see," Dylan said smoothly. "We might have a lot going on tomorrow." I turned my back to them, gripping the edge of the granite counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. The audacity, the sheer, cold-blooded psychopathy of sitting in my kitchen, eating the food I cooked, while casually referencing the aftermath of my planned demise. By 8:30 a.m., Dylan left for the office, and Kai caught the bus. The moment the front door clicked shut, I went to work. I had exactly 20 hours to secure my future and unearth the depth of their betrayal. I headed straight for Dylan's home office. He always kept the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk locked. In the past, I respected his privacy, assuming it was confidential client files. Now, I took a flathead screwdriver and a hammer from the garage and smashed the lock. The cheap metal splintered and gave way. Inside, beneath a stack of old tax returns, was a thick manila folder. I opened it, my eyes scanning the crisp, legal documents. It was a life insurance policy. My life insurance policy. It had been updated exactly 6 weeks ago. The payout had been tripled from $500,000 to $2.5 million. The sole beneficiary was Dylan. Tucked behind the policy was a smaller black velvet box. I popped it open. A stunning 3-carat diamond solitaire ring stared back at me. It wasn't my style. It was flashy, modern, and incredibly expensive. It was exactly what a 26-year-old paralegal would want. I dug deeper into the drawer and found a prepaid burner phone powered off. I held down the power button. No passcode. The screen illuminated, displaying a single text thread with an unsaved number. I tapped it open. "Rachel, did you adjust the valve yet?" "Dylan, doing it tonight when she's asleep. The water heater is already acting up. The fire investigator won't suspect a thing. It'll look like a tragic accident. Rachel." "Is Kai okay with it?" "I feel bad." "Dylan, he's fine. I told him Chloe is leaving us and taking all our money. He hates her right now. Plus, you promised him that new dirt bike. Rachel, I can't wait until it's just the three of us. I love you, Dylan. I love you too. Just one more day. Tomorrow night, we're free." A tear slipped down my cheek, hot and stinging. but I wiped it away fiercely. They had poisoned my own son against me. Dylan had convinced a 12-year-old boy that his mother was a monster, making him complicit in my murder for a dirt bike and the promise of a cool new stepmom. Any lingering shred of maternal guilt, any microscopic hope that Kai was an innocent victim in this, evaporated. They were a unit. A murderous, greedy little triad. And I was nothing but a $2.5 million paycheck standing in their way. I took out my own phone and began taking high-resolution photos of the insurance policy, the ring, and every single text message on the burner phone. I emailed them to a new, encrypted email address I created on the spot. Then, I put everything back exactly as I found it, sliding the broken lock into place, so it looked intact from a glance. Next, I went to our joint bank accounts online. I couldn't drain them without raising red flags. But over the last 14 years, I had quietly managed all the household finances. I transferred exactly half of our liquid savings, $45,000, into a private, offshore account I had set up years ago for my own consulting business. An account Dylan didn't know existed. Then, I packed. I didn't take suitcases. I took a single, nondescript gym bag. I packed my passport, my birth certificate, the jewelry my grandmother had left me, and 3 changes of clothes. I hid the bag in the trunk of my car, parked out of sight in the garage. The stage was set. Now, I just had to survive the dress rehearsal. The evening of October 14th rolled in with a suffocating tension. Every tick of the clock felt like a hammer striking an anvil. When Dylan came home, he kissed my cheek. His lips felt like ice. Kai bounded through the door shortly after, dropping his backpack on the floor and immediately asking Dylan if he had ordered the new Xbox games he promised. "Soon, buddy," Dylan smiled, ruffling Kai's hair. "Very soon. Go wash up for dinner." Dinner was a masterclass in psychological torture. I served roast chicken and mashed potatoes. I chewed my food methodically, watching the two of them. Dylan made small talk about a difficult client at work. Kai complained about his math teacher. They were so incredibly normal. If I hadn't lived through the agony of the fire, if I hadn't read those texts, I would never have suspected that the man pouring my wine was planning to incinerate me in a few hours. "This chicken is a little dry, Chloe," Dylan remarked casually, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "Maybe a little less time in the oven next time." "I'll remember that," I said smoothly, offering him a serene smile. "There's always next time." After dinner, Dylan retreated to his study, claiming he had to prep for his deposition. Kai went upstairs to put on his gaming headset. I cleared the table and loaded the dishwasher. As the water began to run, I slipped into the hallway. I had stopped at an electronics store that afternoon. I pulled a tiny, battery-operated, motion-activated spy camera from my pocket. It was no bigger than a die. I crept down the basement stairs, careful not to make a sound. The air down here was already damp and smelled faintly of mildew. I reached the large, bulky water heater and the tangled mess of gas pipes feeding into it. I attached the camera to the underside of a wooden joist directly above the tank, angling the lens perfectly to capture the gas valve and the surrounding floor. I synced it to an app on my phone, verifying the crystal-clear night vision feed. I went back upstairs and sat in the living room, a book open on my lap, pretending to read. At 11:30 p.m., the house was dark. Dylan thought I was asleep. I lay rigid in the master bed, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The mattress shifted slightly. Dylan slowly slid out from under the covers. I kept my breathing slow and even, perfectly mimicking a deep sleep. I heard the soft click of the bedroom door closing. I immediately grabbed my phone from under my pillow and opened the camera app. The night vision feed flickered to life. A few seconds later, Dylan's figure appeared in the frame. He was wearing gloves. He carried a heavy wrench. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. As I watched my husband approach the gas line, he clamped the wrench onto the main valve. He didn't just loosen it a little. I watched, horrified. As he gave it 3 hard turns, he was flooding the basement with gas. He stood there for a moment, staring at the water heater. Then, he deliberately reached out and tampered with the pilot light mechanism, jamming a small piece of metal into it, to ensure it would spark repeatedly once the thermostat kicked in. He was guaranteeing an explosion. He turned and walked out of frame. I quickly locked my phone and shoved it into my pocket. Slipping out of bed, I was already fully dressed in dark jeans and a black sweater under the duvet. I heard Dylan's footsteps coming back up the stairs. I darted into the master bathroom and silently closed the door, hiding in the walk-in shower. Dylan re-entered the bedroom. He paused, likely checking to see if I was still there. He didn't check the bathroom. He got back into bed. The smell of rotten eggs began to waft up through the floorboards. It was faint at first, but within 20 minutes, it was unmistakable. The gas was rising. It was time. I crept out of the bathroom. Dylan was facing the other way, genuinely asleep now, secure in the knowledge that his trap was set. Tomorrow, he would wake up, ask me to do the laundry, and step outside to wait for the boom. I didn't leave through the front door. The smart doorbell would catch me. Instead, I moved silently down the hallway. I paused outside Kai's door. It was cracked open. The blue light of his monitors bathed his sleeping face. Beside his bed was a framed photo of him, Dylan, and Rachel, at a baseball game. I wasn't in the picture. "Goodbye, Kai," I whispered into the dark. I felt absolutely nothing. I slipped down the stairs, avoiding the creaky fourth step. The smell of gas in the main hallway was nauseatingly strong now. Any spark could set it off. I unlocked the back patio door, sliding it open just enough to squeeze through, and closed it silently behind me. The crisp October night air hit my face, flushing the toxic fumes from my lungs. I walked across the dewy grass to the detached garage, got into my car, and pressed the button to roll the car out in neutral down the driveway, so I wouldn't have to start the engine near the house. Once I was 2 blocks away, I turned the key. The engine purred to life. I didn't look back at the beautiful suburban house that had been my prison, and almost became my crematorium. I drove into the night, the encrypted files and the live video feed resting safely in my pocket. Dylan and Kai thought tomorrow was the day they would be free of me. They had no idea what tomorrow was really going to bring. The Starlight Motel was a decrepit cinderblock building situated off a desolate stretch of Highway 9, 40 miles from the suburban nightmare I had just escaped. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap pine cleaner. The neon sign outside my window flickered a sickly buzzing pink, casting long, distorted shadows across the threadbare carpet. I sat at the wobbly laminate table, a cup of terrible lukewarm gas station coffee in my hands, my eyes glued to my phone screen. It was 6:15 a.m. On my screen, the night vision feed from the basement camera showed the water heater and the heavy iron pipes. But the audio was what I was really paying attention to. I had maxed out the volume on my phone. The house was a ticking time bomb. The gas had been leaking for over 6 hours. The concentration in the basement must have been lethal by now. Silently creeping up the stairs, filling the kitchen, seeping under the baseboards of the living room. At 6:20 a.m., I heard the unmistakable creak of the floorboards above the basement. Dylan was awake. I held my breath. The audio picked up a muffled string of curses. "Chloe? Chloe? Where the hell are you?" His voice was faint, but the irritation was clear. He had expected to wake up, send me downstairs to do the laundry, and step out onto the patio to wait for the explosion. Finding an empty bed threw a wrench into his immaculate, murderous timeline. I heard heavy footsteps stomping across the hardwood floors upstairs. He was checking the guest rooms. Then, the front door opened and closed. He was checking the driveway. My car was gone. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated. A text from Dylan. "Where are you? Your car is gone. You left the stove on or something. The whole house smells like gas. Come back right now." He was establishing a paper trail. If the house blew up while I was gone, He was already planting the seed that I was the careless one. The one who left the stove on. I didn't reply. I just kept watching. At 7:15 a.m., the doorbell rang. The audio from the basement camera picked up the heavy thud of the front door opening. "What are you doing here?" Dylan hissed. His voice was much clearer now. "Likely standing in the hallway directly above the basement stairs. You didn't answer my texts?" A woman's voice replied. High-pitched, anxious. "Rachel, is it done? Where is she?" "She's not here. Her car is gone. The whole damn place is flooded with gas, Rachel. I can barely breathe." "What? What do you mean she's gone? Did she figure it out? How could she figure it out?" Dylan snapped, the facade of the composed lawyer cracking. "I don't know where she went. Maybe she ran to the store. But we have a problem. The gas is everywhere. The pilot light hasn't caught yet. If she doesn't come back down to switch the laundry, the plan is ruined. We'll just have to air the place out and try again." "We can't try again!" Rachel shrieked softly. "Kai is upstairs complaining of a headache from the smell. We can't keep doing this, Dylan. I'm terrified. What if the neighbors smell it?" "Calm down," Dylan commanded. There was a long silence. The hissing of the gas pipe on the camera feed seemed to grow louder in the quiet. "We trigger it ourselves," Dylan said suddenly, his voice taking on a chilling dark timbre. "We get Kai out. We go stand by the detached garage. We toss a lit match through the basement window. The house burns. We claim she left a burner on and fled in a manic state. We still get the insurance money, and she looks like an unstable arsonist who abandoned her family. Are you crazy?" Rachel whimpered. "Do you want the $2.5 million or not, Rachel? Go upstairs. Wake Kai up. Tell him we're going out for breakfast. Get him out the back door." I gripped the edges of the motel table so hard my fingernails bit into my palms. The sheer arrogance. The casual way he pivoted from my murder to property destruction and framing me for arson. I watched the camera feed. 5 minutes passed. I heard the back door slide open and shut. They were outside. Then, on the camera, a shadow fell across the small basement window. The glass pane slid open with a screech. A hand reached in. It was Dylan's hand. He was holding a Zippo lighter. He sparked it. The small orange flame flickered. He didn't realize how gas worked in an enclosed space. He thought the fire would start at the source and slowly build. He didn't realize the entire basement was a compressed pocket of highly combustible propane. He tossed the lighter in. The camera feed blinded me with a brilliant white-hot flash. The audio peaked in a deafening catastrophic roar. A sound so violent it made me drop my phone. The screen immediately went black. "Camera offline," it read. The shockwave had hit. I sat back in my rickety wooden chair, my heart hammering against my ribs, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times in my previous life, the moment the flames took me. Now, the flames had taken my past. I quickly switched to the local news app on my phone and refreshed the page. It would take a few minutes for the fire department to respond, but a blast that size in a quiet, affluent suburb like Oak Ridge Estates would draw immediate attention. 15 minutes later, the breaking news banner flashed across the top of my screen. Massive explosion rocks Oak Ridge Estates. Emergency crews on scene. I clicked the live helicopter feed. My beautiful 2-story colonial home was a towering inferno. The roof had completely caved in. Black smoke billowed hundreds of feet into the autumn sky. The detached garage was partially ablaze, the blast having blown out all its windows. The news anchor's voice buzzed through the phone speaker. Firefighters are currently battling a multi-alarm blaze at a residence on Maplewood Drive. Reports indicate a severe gas explosion. We are getting word that 3 individuals have been transported to Oak Ridge General Hospital. Their conditions are currently unknown. 3 individuals. Dylan, Rachel, and Kai. They had survived, but they hadn't escaped unscathed. The blast wave through that small window would have thrown Dylan back like a rag doll. If Rachel and Kai were standing anywhere near the garage, the shrapnel from the blown-out windows would have caught them. I picked up my coffee and took a slow, deliberate sip. The bitter liquid tasted like victory. The trap they built for me had closed on them. But this was only the physical damage. Now, it was time to destroy their lives completely. For the next 48 hours, I remained a ghost. I paid for 2 more nights at the Starlight Motel in cash. I bought a cheap burner phone and a laptop from a big box store. Using the cash I had withdrawn weeks prior, I didn't touch my credit cards. I didn't log into my social media. I simply watched the news, gathering intelligence like a general preparing for a siege. The local news coverage was relentless. Dylan had survived, but just barely. According to the press conferences held by the hospital, Dylan Henderson, prominent local attorney, had sustained 2nd and 3rd-degree burns across his right arm, chest, and the right side of his face. The blast from the window had essentially flash-fried him. Rachel had suffered severe lacerations from flying glass and a fractured collarbone. Kai was the luckiest of the 3. He had been standing further back and was treated for minor burns, smoke inhalation, and a concussion from being thrown to the ground. By the 3rd day, the narrative began to shift. The police and fire investigators had been combing through the ashes. A detective named Arthur Harrison, a man I knew from a brief encounter at one of Dylan's firm parties, gave a statement to the press. Preliminary investigations indicate that the explosion was not an accident, Detective Harrison announced, his face grim under the flashing lights of the reporters' cameras. We have found evidence of tampering with the main gas valve and the water heater pilot assembly. Furthermore, the homeowner's wife, Chloe Henderson, is currently missing. Her vehicle is unaccounted for. We are asking the public for any information regarding her whereabouts. She is currently a person of interest in this investigation. I let out a harsh, barking laugh that echoed in the empty motel room. Dylan had done it. From his hospital bed, wrapped in bandages, he had played the grieving, betrayed husband. He had told them I was unstable. He had told them I had packed a bag, turned on the gas, and left my family to die. It was a brilliant legal maneuver. By framing me, he deflected all suspicion from himself, ensured he would still get the insurance payout, since a crime committed by a spouse doesn't void the victim's claim, and completely ruined my reputation in one fell swoop. The media ate it up. I was dubbed the Black Widow of Oak Ridge on the morning talk shows. Pundits debated my psychological state. Neighbors I had baked cookies for went on television to say I had always seemed a bit cold. It was time to introduce them to the real Chloe Henderson. I opened my new laptop and connected to a secure VPN. I searched for a specific name. Benjamin Caldwell. Benjamin Caldwell wasn't a family lawyer or a genteel corporate attorney like Dylan. Caldwell was a shark. He was a high-powered, cutthroat defense attorney in downtown Chicago, known for dismantling prosecutors and destroying the lives of those who crossed his clients. He was the kind of lawyer who didn't care if you were guilty or innocent. He only cared about winning, and he charged a small fortune to do it. I found his private office number and dialed it from my burner phone. Caldwell and Associates, a crisp voice answered. I need to speak to Mr. Caldwell immediately. Tell him Chloe Henderson is calling, and I have $2.5 million of evidence he's going to want to see. There was a pause, a click, and 30 seconds later, a deep, gravelly voice came on the line. Mrs. Henderson, you're a very difficult woman to find. Half the state police are looking for you. Let them look, Mr. Caldwell, I said. My voice steady and cold. I need representation. I am currently the prime suspect in an attempted murder and arson case. I am completely innocent. And I have the digital, time-stamped proof to put the actual perpetrators behind bars for a very long time. The perpetrators being my husband and his mistress. Mistress? The news report said the woman at the house was a paralegal helping him with documents. The news reports only know what my husband spoon-fed them. I have video of him tampering with the gas valve. I have photographs of his burner phone detailing their plot to murder me for a life insurance policy he recently tripled. I have evidence of financial fraud. I heard the sound of a chair squeaking on the other end of the line. Caldwell was leaning forward. Video? You say? Time-stamped? Crystal clear. Night vision. Mrs. Henderson, Caldwell said, a predatory purr entering his voice. Where are you? I'm sending a private car. I'll text you the address. But Mr. Caldwell? Yes? I don't just want to clear my name. I want to crush him. I want him to lose his license, his money, his freedom, and his son. I want him to leave that hospital in handcuffs. Chloe, Caldwell chuckled. A dark, rich sound. You and I are going to get along famously. 5 days after the explosion, the media frenzy was at its peak. Dylan had been transferred from the ICU to a private recovery suite. Rachel was in a room 2 floors down. Kai was staying with Dylan's sister, Margaret. The police had officially issued a warrant for my arrest. My face was plastered on every news station. At 10:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, I walked through the sliding glass doors of the Oak Ridge Police Department. I wasn't wearing a disguise. I wore a sharp, tailored navy pantsuit, my hair pulled back into a severe bun, dark sunglasses shielding my eyes. Beside me walked Benjamin Caldwell, carrying a sleek titanium briefcase. He looked like an executioner in a 3-piece suit. The moment I stepped up to the front desk and removed my sunglasses, the young desk sergeant's jaw dropped. He fumbled for his radio. Dispatch. We have a walk-in. The suspect, Chloe Henderson, is in the lobby. Within seconds, 4 officers surrounded us, hands resting cautiously on their holsters. Gentlemen, Caldwell boomed, his voice echoing off the tile walls. I am Benjamin Caldwell, legal counsel for Mrs. Henderson. My client is here to clear up a rather embarrassing misunderstanding by this department. We request an immediate audience with Detective Arthur Harrison, and I suggest you do not attempt to place handcuffs on my client unless you wish to face a multi-million-dollar wrongful arrest and defamation lawsuit before lunch. The officers hesitated. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in a cramped interrogation room. Detective Harrison walked in, looking exhausted, holding a thick file. He slammed it on the metal table. Chloe Henderson, you've got a lot of nerve walking in here, Harrison growled, pulling out a chair. Do you have any idea the damage you've caused? I haven't caused any damage, Detective, I replied, folding my hands neatly on the table. I am the victim of a conspiracy, Harrison scoffed. A conspiracy? Your husband is wrapped in gauze. Your son has a concussion. We found the tampered gas line. We know you did it, Chloe. We just want to know why. Caldwell didn't say a word. He simply popped the latches on his titanium briefcase, pulled out an iPad, and slid it across the table toward Detective Harrison. Detective? Caldwell said smoothly. Before you read my client her rights, I highly recommend you watch this video. It was captured by a motion-activated security camera my client installed in her basement on October 14th. Mere hours before the explosion. Harrison looked from Caldwell to me, his brow furrowed in suspicion. He reached out and tapped the play button on the screen. The interrogation room was silent. Save for the tinny audio playing from the tablet, Harrison watched the black and white night vision footage. He saw Dylan, perfectly recognizable, walk up to the gas line. He saw the wrench. He watched Dylan deliberately turn the main valve 3 times, flooding the room. He watched him jam the piece of metal into the pilot light assembly. Harrison's face drained of color. His eyes widened. He hit replay. He watched it again. Where did you get this? Harrison stammered, looking at me as if I were a ghost. I suspected he was having an affair. I lied smoothly. The truth that I had lived this day before was impossible to explain. I hid the camera to see if he was sneaking her into the house through the basement door. Instead, I caught him building a bomb. Caldwell slid a thick stack of printed papers across the table. These are high-resolution photographs of a burner phone found in Dylan Henderson's home office, documenting a conspiracy between him and Rachel Simmons to murder my client for a newly augmented $2.5 million life insurance policy. You'll find the text messages quite illuminating. They detail the entire plot. Furthermore, We have bank records showing Dylan embezzling funds from his own clients to pay off Rachel's student loans. Harrison slowly opened the folder, his eyes scanning the printed text messages. The arrogant smirk of the hardened detective vanished, replaced by profound professional shock. He had been completely played by Dylan. The media had been played. The whole city had been played. My client, Caldwell continued, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, fled the house in terror that night. She hid, fearing for her life, until she could secure proper legal representation. The fire that occurred the following morning was ignited by Dylan Henderson himself, attempting to destroy the house to collect the property insurance and frame my client when he realized she had escaped his death trap. Harrison closed the folder slowly. He looked at me, a mixture of apology and awe in his eyes. Mrs. Henderson. I apologize, we had no idea. I know, I said softly. But now you do. So, Detective Harrison, what are you going to do about it? Harrison stood up abruptly, grabbing the folder and the iPad. I need to show this to the district attorney. Immediately. Mr. Caldwell, keep your client here. I'll be back in 20 minutes. He wasn't back in 20 minutes. He was back in 15. And he had a judge on speakerphone. By noon, the arrest warrant for Chloe Henderson was officially rescinded. In its place, 2 new warrants were signed. One for Dylan Henderson, one for Rachel Simmons. The charges: attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, arson, insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. Detective, I said, standing up and smoothing my jacket as Harrison prepared to dispatch his officers. I have a request. As the victim, I would like to be present when you serve the warrant to my husband. I believe I have the right to look my attempted murderer in the eye. Harrison hesitated, looking at Caldwell. Caldwell nodded firmly. All right, Mrs. Henderson, Harrison said. But you stay behind me. You do not interfere. I wouldn't dream of it. I smiled. The drive to Oak Ridge General Hospital felt like a victory lap. I sat in the back of the unmarked police cruiser, watching the familiar streets roll by. The fear and trauma that had clung to me since my rebirth were gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline sense of purpose. We arrived at the hospital and took the elevator up to the VIP recovery wing. 2 uniformed officers stood outside room 412. Harrison nodded to them, and they stepped aside. Harrison pushed the heavy wooden door open. The room smelled of antiseptic and medical tape. Dylan was propped up in the hospital bed. The right side of his face was covered in a thick, white burn mask. His right arm was heavily bandaged and suspended in a sling. He looked pathetic. He looked weak. Kai was sitting in a chair beside the bed, playing on a brand new Nintendo Switch. Margaret, Dylan's sister, was reading a magazine in the corner. They all looked up as Detective Harrison entered, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Detective Harrison, Dylan said, his voice raspy and hoarse from the smoke damage to his vocal cords. The unbandaged side of his face formed a weak, tragic smile. Do you have news? Did you find Chloe? We did. Mr. Henderson, Harrison said, his voice stripped of all former sympathy. It was flat and hard. I stepped out from behind the tall detective. The magazine slipped from Margaret's hands, hitting the floor with a soft slap. Kai dropped his switch, his jaw hanging open, but Dylan's reaction was the one I would savor forever. His visible eye bulged. The heart monitor next to his bed instantly spiked, the rhythmic beeping accelerating into a frantic, high-pitched tempo. He tried to push himself up, but his burned arm failed him, and he collapsed back against the pillows, gasping. Chloe, he choked out, his voice trembling with a terror he couldn't hide. Hello, Dylan, I said, walking to the foot of his bed. I looked down at him, my expression perfectly serene. You look terrible. The new insurance policy isn't going to cover cosmetic surgery in prison, I'm afraid. What are you doing here? He stammered, looking wildly at Harrison. Arrest her, She tried to kill us. She blew up the house. Harrison didn't move to arrest me. Instead, he pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. Dylan Henderson. Harrison boomed, his voice filling the sterile room. I have a warrant for your arrest for the attempted murder of Chloe Henderson, conspiracy, and arson. No! Dylan screamed, his voice cracking. That's a lie! She's crazy! She's lying to you! She didn't have to say a word, Dylan, I interrupted, leaning closer to the bed. I lowered my voice so only he could hear the absolute venom in it. I found the burner phone, Dylan. I found the ring you bought Rachel. But most importantly, I bought a motion-activated camera. I put it in the basement. I watched you turn the valve. I watched you jam the pilot light. And then, from a motel room, I watched you throw a lighter through the window because you were too impatient to wait for the insurance money. All the blood drained from the unburned half of his face. He looked like a corpse. The fight completely left his body. He knew he was destroyed. You, he whispered, staring at me as if I were a demon clawing its way out of hell. You knew. I knew everything, I replied, standing up straight. Dad? Kai's small, frightened voice broke the silence. He was staring at Dylan, then at me. Mom? What's going on? Dad said you went crazy and tried to hurt us. I looked at the 12-year-old boy who had stood on the lawn and watched me burn in another life. The boy who had traded my life for a dirt bike and a cool stepmom. I didn't feel a shred of maternal affection. I only felt pity. Your father lied to you, Kai, I said coldly. Your father and Rachel tried to murder me for money. And now, your father is going to spend the rest of his life in a concrete cell. Officers, Harrison commanded. The two uniformed cops stepped forward. One of them gently but firmly grabbed Dylan's uninjured left arm, pulling it toward the bed rail, and locked a steel handcuff around his wrist, securing him to the bed until he was medically cleared to be transferred to the county jail. Dylan didn't fight. He just stared at the ceiling, tears leaking from his good eye, his chest heaving with panicked, shallow breaths. The brilliant, arrogant lawyer was gone. Only a broken, pathetic criminal remained. I turned on my heel and walked out of the hospital room without a backward glance. I had walked out of the fire, and I had burned their entire world to the ground. But I wasn't finished yet. Rachel was 2 floors down, and she still thought she was going to marry a millionaire. It was time to pay the bride-to-be a visit. The elevator ride down to the 2nd floor felt incredibly slow. But I didn't mind. I used the time to savor the adrenaline coursing through my veins. For 14 years, I had been the dutiful, invisible wife. I had curated the perfect suburban existence, folded the laundry, balanced the checkbook, and smiled at firm holiday parties. While my husband's gaze lingered on women 10 years my junior, I had been a supporting character in my own life, but the fire had burned away the margins. Now, I was the author. I stepped off the elevator into the surgical recovery wing. This floor was quieter, the lighting softer. I checked the room numbers until I found 214. The nameplate beside the door read, Simmons R. I placed my hand on the cool metal of the doorknob, took a steadying breath, and pushed it open. Rachel was sitting up in bed, a plastic tray of half-eaten green jello resting on her lap. Her left arm was immobilized in a heavy blue sling, and a thick white bandage wrapped around her forehead, covering a deep laceration on her cheek. She was furiously typing on her phone with her good hand, her brow furrowed in frustration. Undoubtedly, she was trying to reach Dylan, entirely unaware that his phone was currently sitting in an evidence locker. She looked up at the sound of the door clicking shut. For a fraction of a second, her face registered blank confusion. Then, recognition hit her. The color drained from her unbruised cheek, leaving her looking like a porcelain doll that had been dropped on a concrete floor. She gasped, dropping her phone onto the blankets. What? What are you doing here? She whispered, her voice trembling. She instinctively pressed herself back against the pillows as if trying to merge with the wall behind her. How did you get in here? I'm calling for a nurse. She reached for the call button clipped to her bed rail, but I crossed the room in 3 long strides, and snatched the plastic device from her grasp, tossing it casually onto the visitor's chair. "I wouldn't do that, Rachel," I said, my voice smooth and perfectly modulated. "The nurses are very busy, and you and I have a lot to talk about." "Get out!" she hissed, though she didn't dare raise her voice too loud. "You're a fugitive. Dylan told me you lost your mind. He told me you tried to blow up the house. You're going to prison." I couldn't help it. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a baring of teeth. "Oh, sweet, naive Rachel," I murmured, pulling up a chair and sitting down right beside her bed. I crossed my legs elegantly, smoothing the crease of my navy trousers. "Dylan told you a lot of things, didn't he? He told you he loved you. He told you he was going to leave me. He told you about the $2.5 million insurance policy." Her breath hitched. Her eyes darted wildly around the room, as if searching for a hidden camera. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm his paralegal. We were just doing paperwork when you attacked us. Paperwork in the basement at midnight? How incredibly dedicated." I mocked softly. I leaned in closer, dropping the playful tone. My voice became a blade. "I know everything, Rachel. I know about the dirt bike you promised my son to buy his silence. I know about the 3-carat solitaire diamond ring sitting in the bottom drawer of Dylan's desk. It's a beautiful ring, by the way. A little tacky for my taste, but perfectly suited for a girl who thinks she can sleep her way into a country club membership." "Shut up." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over her bruised cheeks. "You're lying. He loves me. He's going to marry me. He's going to the state penitentiary, Rachel." I corrected her, watching the absolute devastation ripple across her face. "You see, while you two were busy planning my funeral, I was busy planting a motion-activated security camera right above the water heater. I watched him turn the gas valve. I watched him jam the pilot light. And then, I watched him throw a lighter through the window to destroy the evidence when he realized I had escaped." "No," she sobbed, shaking her head frantically. "No, no, no. He said it was foolproof. He said the fire investigator would call it an accident. It was an accident." I agreed coldly. It was a tragic accident that he ever thought he could outsmart me. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out my phone, opening the photo gallery. I held the screen up to her face. It was a high-resolution image of the text messages from Dylan's burner phone. "Rachel, is Kai okay with it? I feel bad. Dylan, he's fine. I told him Chloe is leaving us. Conspiracy to commit murder, Rachel." I read the words slowly, letting them sink into her panicked mind. Attempted murder. Arson. Insurance fraud. Do you know what the mandatory minimums are for those charges in this state? Because Benjamin Caldwell, my attorney, does. He estimates you'll be in your mid-50s by the time you're eligible for parole. Rachel let out a strangled, pathetic wail. She brought her good hand up to cover her face, her shoulders shaking violently. "I didn't want to hurt you," she cried, the lie slipping out in her desperation. "It was his idea. Dylan made me do it. He said if I didn't help him, he would fire me and make sure I never worked in a law firm again. He manipulated me. Save the performance for the jury," I said, standing up and brushing a speck of imaginary lint from my sleeve. "You wanted my house. You wanted my husband. And you wanted my money. But in the end, the only thing you're going to get is a 9x6 concrete cell." I turned toward the door just as it swung open. Detective Arthur Harrison stepped into the room, followed closely by 2 female police officers holding handcuffs. Harrison looked at the weeping, pathetic mess in the hospital bed, then looked at me. "Are we finished here, Mrs. Henderson?" "We are, Detective," I replied, stepping aside to give the officers a clear path. She was just telling me how much she regrets her choices. As the officers moved in and began reading Rachel Simmons her Miranda rights over the sound of her hysterical sobbing, I walked out into the quiet, brightly lit hallway. I didn't look back. The air felt incredibly light, clean, and completely devoid of the smell of smoke. The wheels of justice are notoriously slow, But when lubricated by irrefutable digital evidence and a ruthless lawyer like Benjamin Caldwell, they can move with terrifying efficiency. The next 6 months were a masterclass in systematic destruction. I didn't just want Dylan and Rachel behind bars. I wanted to erase their legacy, their pride, and their financial security. I wanted to salt the earth so nothing could ever grow there again. It started with the criminal trials. The local media, having previously painted me as a deranged, murderous housewife, pivoted so violently they nearly gave themselves whiplash. I was the new darling of true crime podcasts and daytime talk shows, the ultimate survivor who had outsmarted a sociopathic husband. I declined all interviews. I let Caldwell do the talking on the courthouse steps, his booming voice shaping the narrative exactly as we wanted. As expected, the deep love between Dylan and Rachel evaporated the moment they were facing 25 years to life. It became a vicious prisoner's dilemma, and they both eagerly betrayed each other. Rachel took a plea deal first. She turned state's witness against Dylan, claiming she was a young, naive subordinate who was psychologically coerced and threatened by a powerful older partner at her firm. She testified that Dylan had meticulously planned the explosion for months, researching the combustion properties of propane on his office computer. In exchange for her testimony, the district attorney dropped the attempted murder charge, leaving her with conspiracy and insurance fraud. She was sentenced to 12 years in a medium-security women's facility. Dylan's trial was a public slaughter. He had lost his law license the moment the embezzlement charges were filed. It turned out, the $45,000 I had siphoned into my offshore account was just the tip of his financial iceberg. To afford the lavish lifestyle he used to woo Rachel, the expensive dinners, the hotel suites, the 3-carat ring he had been quietly stealing from the settlement funds of his own clients. With his assets frozen by the state and his firm dissolved in disgrace, Dylan couldn't afford a high-powered defense team. He was represented by an exhausted public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I sat in the front row of the gallery every single day of the trial. I wore immaculate designer suits paid for by my offshore reserves. I made sure Dylan saw me. He looked like a ghost of the arrogant lawyer I once married. The right side of his face was a tapestry of pink, tight burn scars that pulled his eye into a permanent drooping squint. His hair was thinning, and he had lost at least 20 pounds in county jail. Whenever our eyes met across the courtroom, I didn't glare. I simply offered him a serene, empty smile. It tortured him more than any scowl ever could. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge, an older woman with a reputation for merciless sentencing, looked down at Dylan with undisguised disgust. She sentenced him to 40 years in a maximum security state penitentiary, without the possibility of early parole. He would die behind bars. But the criminal conviction was only the first half of my revenge. The civil suit was where I took his soul. While Dylan was locked in a cell, Caldwell and I moved in on the remnants of his life. Through a brutal divorce decree and a civil lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, I laid claim to absolutely everything. Since Dylan intentionally caused the fire, his homeowner's insurance policy was voided regarding his personal property. But as the innocent spouse and victim, Caldwell successfully argued that I was entitled to the land value and the remaining equity. We sold the blackened lot on Maplewood Drive to a developer for a massive profit. I took his retirement accounts. I took his investment portfolios. I even took the vintage Rolex collection he kept in a safe deposit box and auctioned it off, donating the proceeds to a charity for burn victims in his name. Of course, ensuring the press covered the ironic gesture. Then came the matter of Kai. This was the part that the public didn't understand. The true crime bloggers expected me to sweep my son into my arms, claiming he was brainwashed, and that a mother's love conquers all. But they hadn't stood on the other side of that basement door. They hadn't seen the blank, uncaring stare of a 12-year-old boy, watching his mother burn because he was promised a dirt bike. I am not a saint. I am a survivor, and I refuse to harbor a threat. Kai was placed in the temporary custody of Dylan's sister, Margaret. Margaret was a sour, tight-fisted woman who lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a dreary neighboring town. During the custody hearing, Caldwell presented the psychological evaluations and the text messages proving Kai's complicity and active hatred toward me. I stood before the family court judge and formally, legally severed my parental rights. Mrs. Henderson, the judge asked gently, clearly sympathetic to my trauma. Are you absolutely certain? The boy has been heavily manipulated by his father, with intense therapy. Your Honor? I interrupted smoothly, my voice echoing in the quiet courtroom. I died in that house. The woman who was Kai's mother did not survive the fire. I cannot provide him with the love he requires. Nor can I live in a home with someone who stood by and watched my attempted murder. It is in the best interest of both parties that we part ways permanently. The judge signed the order. As I walked out of the courtroom, Margaret was sitting on a wooden bench in the hallway, looking overwhelmed and exhausted. Beside her sat Kai. He looked up at me. He was wearing clothes that were too small, and the arrogant smirk he used to mimic from his father was completely gone. He just looked small, lost, and afraid. He opened his mouth, perhaps to say he was sorry, perhaps to beg me to take him away from Margaret's suffocating apartment and back to a life of privilege. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I walked past him as if he were a stranger on the street. The sharp click of my heels on the marble floor, the only sound I left behind. He had chosen his side. Now, he had to live with the consequences of that choice. 3 years have passed since the night of the fire. The ashes of Oak Ridge Estates are nothing more than a distant, fading memory, replaced by the brilliant skyline of my new reality. I moved to Chicago. I dropped the surname Henderson, a name tainted by betrayal and ash, and legally reclaimed my maiden name, Chloe Vance. But I didn't just change my name. I changed my entire trajectory. With the funds I secured from the offshore account and the massive civil settlement, I didn't retreat into a quiet life of wealthy obscurity. I used my intimate, terrifying knowledge of deceit to build an empire. I founded Advanced Financial Forensics, a boutique investigative firm specializing in high-stakes divorces and corporate embezzlement. I hire retired forensic accountants, former IRS agents, and private investigators. We are the people wealthy women call when they suspect their powerful husbands are hiding assets in shell companies, offshore trusts, or crypto wallets. I am incredibly good at my job because I know exactly how a liar's mind works. I know where they hide the money. And I know the arrogance that inevitably leads to their downfall. My office is on the 42nd floor of a sleek glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan. It is decorated in stark whites, cool grays, and chrome. There is not a single fireplace, candle, or gas appliance in the entire building. I am sitting at my desk, sipping an espresso, looking out over the water. The sky is a brilliant, cloudless blue. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, knocks gently on the glass door before entering. Miss Vance, she says, holding a thick stack of mail. The mailroom just sent these up. And there's a letter here. It looks like it's from the state penitentiary. The return address says Dylan Henderson. I don't look up from my laptop. Put it in the shredder, Sarah. Unopened. Of course. She nods without missing a beat, turning toward the industrial shredder in the corner of the office. Over the past 3 years, Dylan has tried to contact me 6 times. Sometimes it's a plea for forgiveness. Sometimes it's a legal threat from some jailhouse lawyer he befriended. Sometimes, according to the warden whom I occasionally check in with, it's just a rambling, desperate manifesto blaming me for his ruined life. I have never read a single word. His voice, his thoughts, his apologies, they hold absolutely no power over me anymore. He is a ghost haunting a steel cage, and I am the woman who locked the door. Rachel, I hear through the grapevine, is working in the prison laundry, her youth and beauty fading under the harsh fluorescent lights and the grueling routine of institutional life. She will be 40 by the time she sees the outside world again, carrying the permanent scarlet letter of a convicted felon. No law firm will ever hire her. No wealthy man will ever look twice at her. And Kai? Last I heard, He dropped out of high school and was working a minimum wage job at a car wash, still living in Margaret's cramped apartment, bitterly resentful of the father who promised him the world and left him with nothing. It is a harsh karma, but it is the karma he earned. The shredder whirs to life, a loud, grinding noise that destroys Dylan's letter in less than 2 seconds, turning his desperate words into meaningless confetti. "Oh, and Miss Vance," Sarah adds, glancing at her tablet. "Your 2:00 p.m. appointment is here. Mrs. Schuyler." She suspects her husband, the CEO of Schuyler Logistics, has hidden roughly $4 million in a Cayman Islands account before serving her with divorce papers. I smile. It is a genuine, sharp, predatory smile. "Send her in, Sarah," I say, closing my laptop and folding my hands on the pristine surface of my desk. Let's help Mrs. Schuyler burn his little empire to the ground. Fate gave me a second chance, pulling me out of the flames and breathing life back into my smoke-filled lungs. I didn't waste it. I didn't forgive. And I certainly didn't forget. I took the fire that was meant to destroy me, and I used it to forge a sword. Reborn from the ashes, I didn't just survive the nightmare. I became the one who commands the flames. They thought the fire would be the absolute end of my story, a tragic little accident that would leave them rich, happy, and completely free. But they didn't know that some women aren't consumed by the flames, they are forged by them. Reborn from the ashes of their ultimate betrayal, I took back my life, completely dismantled their perfect crime, and built a ruthless empire on the ruins of their greed. Dylan is rotting in a concrete cell, Rachel's pathetic dreams are shattered, and Kai is learning the harsh, lifelong price of his choices. My past is dead, but my future has never burned brighter. If you loved following this journey of ultimate revenge and watching hard karma hit back exactly the way it should, please hit that like button. Share this video with anyone who loves a powerful, dramatic story where the villains get exactly what they deserve. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another thrilling, real-life storytelling experience. Thank you for watching. And remember, always trust your instincts.